Fantasia. Book 4. The Legacy of Dragonstarr. Greetings and welcome back to my world, the world of Fantasia. You hear that out there? It is as this book begins, with the winds and tides of war. Your world is cometh to that. So it needs a new hope. This is a book about fate, about choices, about destiny. It is the center of the saga, and perhaps my favorite story of them all. So get comfortable, and let me tell ye a tale about a tale. Let me tell you about Fantasia, Novel 4, The War of the Dragon Lords, Episode 4, The Legacy of Dragonstarr. I'm going to assume you've read the previous 3 books, but not necessarily. Sometimes a good saga begins with episode 4. That's where I almost began mine, with this story. It's a restart, and if you've read book 3 and you know how it ends, you understand already what I mean. Now, I'm going to assume that after, say, minute 13, I'll go on full spoilers of the first 3 books. But up until then, you got about 9 minutes and 20 odd seconds to 27, to just hear what I have to say about what this is before I spoil the first 3 books for you. But imagine if Star Wars had been made in sequence, it'd be kind of hard to talk about Episode 4 without the first 3, or it'd be kind of hard to talk about Lord of the Rings starting in the middle of the 2 towers without mentioning the events of the Fellowship or the Hobbit even. It'd be a little difficult. So, this is a continuation of that, and I'll get into more details, but in the beginning I just want to talk and set the stage a bit. Well, I got rumbly noise in the background, which is appropriate. I'm recording this in the middle of the afternoon because it's a beautiful day outside, and that's befitting the story. It's befitting the golden light, the spirit of our heroine, our protagonist, as each book follows a tradition of a different point of view of a different character. Who do you think book 4 is about? If you read book 3, there was only 2 characters left, and that can go on from this point. Minor spoilers, not everybody dies. A lot of the characters, the Fellowship is scattered. We're at the breaking of the fellowship point. Well, we've already had, of the two characters the camera's on, we've already had one story. That was book 3. So who's left? And if we're having a new beginning, who else would mirror book 1? Who is literally the twin of our heroine from book 1? Excelsior. And you have a sense of, well, it's springtime. And she is such a bubbly spirit. She is such a happy, always sees the good in things, sunny spirit. I couldn't record this in the darkness of the middle of the night. There's going to be a little background noise. And that's befitting the beginning of the story, since it's starting off with war. Not really spoilers, but I mean, it's being set up through the first 3 books. The war is coming. Well, now the war is here. Interesting timing. These books have always been very meta, very parallel to many dimensions of my life, from the past to the paranormal to the present and the paranormal future. I'm releasing these books that I wrote about the world to come at the time the world is coming to that point. Time of war. And while everyone's warring over the mindless masses for their, Rings of Power failed, House of the Dragon just to rip off a Game of Thrones, just to rip off Lord of the Rings. You want something different, fantasy, and fresh? Well, let's have some levity during the war. Some good old-fashioned fantasy fun. I offer an alternate path for everyone. Just like in my novels. I don't go into the war is happening, but it's a backdrop. My novels are not about Games of Thrones or politics or anything like that. They are about classic adventure fantasy. The politics in the war is just there to give us an excuse to get some bad guys to fight. I detest politics, and I don't let them infringe upon my books. No, this is your classic romantic Arthurian, Tolkien, gaming adventure style. The wilderness quest with a small group of heroes. And the larger scheme of things, they are secret agents on a critical mission for the war. The quest. To do the magic thing, to take out the big bad guy in black robes, and well, it's not quite how it looks in my books, but that idea. But there is some big battles. If this is a movie trailer, things you'll see in this book, there's there is a siege. Well, just think of book 1. There's a lot of parallels here. It's like poetry. They rhyme, Mr. Lucas. Except mine actually do. Yours don't. But, well, people can't see. They do. There's so much people don't see. These are very alchemical as well, actually. Lucas might... They're not written for mass consumption. They're written for purpose. They are a creation of love. They are a labor of love. 30 years of work. And they are one of my few promises to keep before I leave this world. Promise to my family and promise to my lady love. Tell the whole story. To keep all my promises. I will not let darkness destroy myself. I will not give in to the dark side. I will not give in to chaos. I will not become an agent of chaos. Another theme of this book. Back to those choices of fate. Destiny. To be made by a character who doesn't have the same shortcomings that we do. We don't need to tread old territory. We need to get down to the universalities of what light and darkness, not good and evil, order and chaos are. Applicable choices to anyone and everyone. When you have a character who's basically eternal, not immortal, people can die, elves can die. But they're not as afraid of the dead as the humans are. They know what lies beyond better. They come from there. So what's terrifying to all of us? I don't deal in good and evil. I deal in order and chaos. Good and evil are points of view, Skywalker. I don't tell the audience what is. I don't tell them how magic works. I don't any more than I tell them how politics works. I leave the details to your preference, your experience, your Fantasia. To see what you want to see in it. I provide the archetypes. The Lord of Chaos is my Darth Vader, and he's still out there. And in this trailer, you'll see more than him. You'll see the battle in the city. There will be siege warfare, as well as classic quest. You'll see a lot more references of things I was rediscovering. Rituals, masonry, Hollywood truths. And a whole lot of my truths. My legacy. And now it's time to tell the truth. Not tease, not trailer. No trailer, but truth. Spoilers, safety off now. You might think I already gave some, but that's just the trailer. Trailer's got to show who's in the movie. Now I'm going to get into the details of what this book is about. And if you commit your time to it, that this is what you can expect to read over a few 100,000 words. When we last left off, all that was left of the fellowship was Oliver, the fool, bringing the grail to the maimed king. And when the king awoke, as in Borman's Excalibur, guards, knights, squires, prepare for battle. Prepare for war. And the book ended with Oliver there watching the armies mass for war. Almost wondering what have we done, but what else could we have done that let darkness run across the face of the earth? And beneath it too, and above it. As one the other, below, above, yin and yang. I always pictured him watching the armies flow out across the fields of Cronin, the Holy Kingdom, almost operatic, listening to Carmina Burana clutching the leg of Excelsia, their fiery hair just billowing in the wind, gazing out across the carnage she knows to come. What can she possibly do about it? The music hits its crescendo, fade out, roll credits, book 3 over. Now what? Well, now it's time for the War of Chaos, the Age of Darkness, the War of the Dragon Lords. You can have your House of Dragons, we got a war of them, and then some, a war and more. The Chronicles of the Crystals, and the War of their Lords. Just like in reality. Damn Illuminati pulling the strings. Well, the Illuminati are the boss at end of level. We're not going to get to the main bad guy till book 7. You know, it's like the Emperor and all Star Wars. In the meantime, Darth Vader's going to go many rounds with our many heroes. He already had victory last book. Kicked the Fellowship's ass. Scattered them. Slew some of them. Some are dead and not coming back. But I won't spoil who is and isn't coming back, although you can probably suspect based on their characters. Who's not quite dead yet? I think they could pull through, sir. They were not mortally wounded in vain. And their stories will be books 5 and 6. Now, there's going to be a confusing take on the narrative here that I'm not sure any other series of novels has done, and is against my style of not only storytelling but even gaming upon which these novels are based, of course. I mean, more than just my fantasy world. I strive to keep these novels, while serious and well done, and like Star Wars or Indiana Jones, I'm just trying to make the best schlock possible. I want to keep them cheesy and stupid. You know, they're games at the heart of it. That's why I prefer a wilderness adventure to politics. It's just booby traps and monsters and dungeons and, you know, the fun stuff. But in my gaming, I like a linear adventure, like The Hobbit, or if it's a dungeon, it's a maze. Okay, we're going to map it out, but it's level after level. We're dungeoneering, we're treasure hunting, we're running the gauntlet. You know, it's pretty straightforward. We're having a good time. Let's not overcomplicate things. But in my own saga here, I'm going to do something really weird. And it is not only a narrative choice, you might call it a gimmick, but I'm not out to sell these. You know, that's not why they were designed. If they were, I'd have tried selling them decades ago. But it's an artistic choice as well, because it has to do with the theme of the story and the world. And that is kind of like, a lot like in my own life. Time is not all that linear. Now, the books at this point split, like Lord of the Rings, into multiple narratives. This book, Book 4, tells the tale of Excelsia, or Excelsia. You can pronounce it however you like, a little Fantasia there. I deliberately make names even I don't know how to properly pronounce because I don't want to know. I want to keep it fun. Well, Crystal obviously is how you pronounce, Crystal Everfair. Or Everfair. They're playful names. They're role-playing game character names. Everyone's going to pronounce them differently at the table. Anyway, Excelsia is now going to go on her own quest like her sister Crystal, or Ariel did in Book 1. And she's not going alone, in the words of Gandalf, them hobbits. Like Samwise to Frodo, Oliver's going with her. He ain't gonna leave her. Those two have great chemistry. They're great friends, because they're both children. When I've been writing these characters, getting to know them for 30 years, I met Oliver and Excelsia in 1992. And I could just tell amongst the party, the rest of the characters, that they're going to gravitate towards each other because they're of the same free spirit. And that's why they have already, at this point, even before her book where she's center stage now, Excelsia picked up the golden light in Book 2, Chapter 4-ish, but she really always had it. Just like Oliver picked up the silver light at the end of Book 3, with the Chalice of Caduceus, or whatever he wanted it to be. That's what it is. It's Fantasia. It's manifestation. It's neoing the Matrix. It's not that there was a cup in the mountain of Caduceus. It's that's what Oliver wanted, because he wanted to save the king and do the right thing. The fool finds the grail, the honest fool. The child in us all that just wants a pure adventure with no politics polluting it. The silver light is symbolic of the moon, just as the golden light is symbolic of the sun, and hence why I'm recording this at daytime. Excelsia is so full of life. She is just that eternally optimistic person. Or at least she has been up to this point. Now she's going to be tested. And in a slight departure, a slight difference from the parallel story of her sister, who had amnesia, didn't know who she was. We know who Excelsia is. And we know what she's been through. We've been through it with her. Last book, one of the character arcs I'm most proud of can be summed up in a few short lines of dialogue. Early in the book, 3, Excelsia looks at Jenner, and I may just hate that man. And then at the end of the book, I may just love that man. And then he's gone. We have no mystery or amnesia or any kind of questions about what is tormenting Excelsia, who has for thousands of years lived in blissful paradise in the Crystal Springs, sort of the Rivendell or the Lothlorien of Fantasia, although with a lot more theme park and ski lodge motifs worked in there. And now she wants to go see adventure, and she's seen it. And while Crystal, as Ariel, didn't really have a choice, she had to face mortality. She got red-pilled and popped. she had to deal with the Matrix full on. Excelsia's had at least a little build-up, but it's still... It's a coming-of-age story, in a way. Even though she's thousands of years old, she's a child now thrust into the real world, and she's had real losses. How does that optimism hold up now? That's what I explore in her character, amongst many other things, which are always reflections of myself. And that fate and choices, choice of paths. There is no, what you hear me or may hear me talk about all the time in my other commentaries, how there is no perfect dimension, there is no perfect timeline. It's all about choosing paths, which helps with the classic setting of the linear wilderness adventure, or semi-linear. You know, like in The Hobbit, they had to choose their way through Mirkwood and stuff like that. Like a video game, at the end of level, okay, which way do we choose? Through the caves or through the dragon's lair? Which has more XP? And we got Oliver helping make these choices, you know, the fool. It's very Pippin-like and the trouble he can get everyone into. And that makes for a fun story, doesn't it? We're all children at heart. I don't care too much about realism, although I do keep the characters in check in my head, like with a game master and the character sheets. I really try and don't want them to be stupid and not use power or weapons they have, you know. I put myself to the test with every line on every page. Don't be a bad gamer. Don't be stupid. If I was making a movie, I'd be counting bullets, you know, just in the editing room. Make sure it's accurate, but still have fun. But it's all about choices, and there is no perfect one. Like the dialogue in Book 3, where I may just hate that man becomes I may just love that man. And now what? Now he's gone. A similarly, what I think is good line, if I was cutting the trailer, this would be a trailer line. And that is where Excelsia is lamenting the loss of Sir Jenner, and she's like, you know, if I hadn't been so damn silly and, you know, taken things more seriously, maybe more of us would have made it. And, you know, she's really being hard on herself. She's new to death and loss. She's a good-natured person. She's naturally going to blame herself, and Oliver's the only one there to shoulder her conscience. The smallest one of all on his little shoulders. He's got to do that Samwise for Frodo stuff. And Excelsius having a hard time with it, and Oliver says to her, well, Excelsius having a Frodo moment of, I wish the ring had never come to me, I wish none of this had happened. So I guess Oliver's got to be Gandalf too, and say, so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. It's that sort of scene where she's sad that she came on this and was so much trouble to people, but Oliver says, but if you didn't, you'd never have met Sir Jenner and fallen in love. You'd never have known that. And she can't say he's wrong. She got to chew on that. We all do in life. Excelsia may be a few thousand years old, but she didn't study like her sister. When she was in the Springs, I always picture her kind of like being an elven socialite, but not in a bad way. She doesn't take it for granted, but she really does enjoy the hell out of it. Going to the late night bonfires and swimming in the magical pools and dancing all night. You know, she's having a good old time. She's that youthful spirit. While Crystal has had to learn the ways of the world well enough for centuries, dealing with all the wizards and their business. I figure when the wizards come to Crystal Springs for a meeting, it's sort of like the corporate executives. The mafia comes to the boss's house, but they don't go out to the pool where people are sunbathing and stuff. You know, they're in the big house talking business. Crystal kept the high wizards up in the Rivendels or the Lothlorien trees, while Excelsia's down at the pool, you know, moonbathing all night. probably in the nude, knowing her. Although notice it's never sexual. There's never one sex scene. Excelsia is a fun character to write, and I dare say if this was made into a movie, it'd be a great role for an actress who would clearly play dual roles. Crystal and Excelsia have very minimal screen time together throughout the saga, so you could play two different characters relatively easy. And while Crystal is very serious because of her job, basically, Excelsia is the total opposite. She's free-spirited and footloose and loose, and not in every other way though. And she's sexual without being sexual. She's hot. Like Lilu hot from Fifth Element. When that movie came out in '97, I'm like, damn, someone made my story, but they did it in science fiction. If Fifth Element had been set in the Middle Ages or something, that's my story there. You know, the Lilu's thermal bandages. Never a sex scene with that, and although Bruce does sneak a kiss, doesn't he? But I think Excelsia is a virgin. I think she's sort of like delayed elven adolescence or something, where she knows she's attractive, but she doesn't know what it means. She knows that people like to look at her, but she thinks like a child, like, oh, they just want to play with me. I mean, she knows what love is, but in theory, but she doesn't know what it is until suddenly, recently, and now it's all gone to hell. So she may not even want to think about it. Oh, I got to do something to put this out of my mind. Oh, hey, there's a war going on. What a convenient distraction. The war he died for. Oh, she's gonna have issues, folks. Oliver has issues with the supernatural. She has issues with death, but in a different way. So they're good for each other. It's a good road buddy movie story kind of thing. And in the true sense of a role-playing game, I get to take you on a tour of my world. That's at the heart of role-playing games in all fantasy sagas, in my opinion. And all big film franchises, you look at what they have in common. I preached this at film school, no one listened. That they all take you to a different place. They create a universe you want to live in. Everything from Star Wars to Star Trek to Lord of the Rings to... I mean, you name the franchise. Even Indiana Jones in a weird way. Not that we'd want to go into the snake pit, but some of us would. Depending on what's down there. If the Ark was down... But just that 1930s world and the fantasy version of it, the romanticized version of it. We want to live there. So, to me, role-playing games, they're kind of like Victorian novels like Jules Verne and the worlds Indiana Jones was based on. In a pre-internet, pre-television, even pre-cinema age, really, people didn't leave their town. They didn't have their own cars. They didn't even have a light rail or anything. They had nothing. You lived outside the city. You had to walk there. So people got to explore the world through pulp novels and things. And so there's all these stories from H.G. Wells to Robert E. Howard and Raphael Sabatini, some of my favorites, whether you're talking about time machines or barbarians or pirates. It's all about faraway worlds and exotic lands and different cultures. So role-playing games, I think, are the 20th century equivalent, or the late 20th century equivalent to that. The Victorian era had their Jules Verne's, we had our Gary Gygax. They had the H.G. Wells, we had J.R. Tolkien and Robert E. Well, you get it. So in my stories, this is another thing, politics totally gets in the way of that road movie where you not only have good friendship like children on the playground, good for coming of age and basic morals and classic storytelling, but you got the excuse to go from one exotic land and crazy adventure to another. There's a ruined castle, there's a haunted forest, there's a frozen mountain, there's a dragon's lair, there's a misty island, there's a hidden fairy, there's a fairy grove. And yeah, they're all in this book. Not necessarily in that order. I'm going to spoil this book. I'll talk about books 1 through 3, but not 4, 5, or 6, any more than, again, books 5 and 6 have different protagonists. And getting back to the distortion of time, this getting into the war and the story. And that is, I said, in a Lord of the Rings way, we split into different narratives. Not spoiling who books 5 and 6 are about, but they take place simultaneously. Book 5 begins at the same point in time, really, as Book 4, just with a different character. Not everybody died at the breaking of the Fellowship. There's more of the Fellowship still alive than Excelsia and Oliver. They're just off somewhere else doing something else. And they have their own book. And then Book 6, same deal, although throughout Book 6, the stories begin to merge. Now this is the artistic, stylistic choice I mentioned earlier is about chaos, or the darkness as I call it. Very generic, never explained what it is. Do not ask me to explain what it is, because I won't ever metachlorianize the Force. Not that I have anything against Lucas doing that. I actually understand what he's talking about. Listen to my esoteric commentaries on it. It's very fascinating what he actually was doing. But I also understand that when it's bad storytelling that isn't dumbed down for the masses, it's going to be lost. So I walk a fine line there. I just know that I don't want it, just in the spirit of Fantasia, I want you to see what you want to see and make it your own as much as you can. I've seen where giving the audience too much just doesn't work. Thank you, Lucas, for taking a hit for me there. Now I know what not to do. I keep it mysterious. I keep it nebulous. Like the name of the great rainbow wizard who mentored the Yoda to Crystal. Nebulous. The rainbow wizard. But the darkness is basically just the merging of this world, the mortal realm, with the supernatural one. And the more chaos you create, the more it sunders the barrier between dimensions. Stranger Things, the popular show I've bitched about plenty elsewhere, about how it's basically plagiarism of my life and my concepts. If you've read books 1 through 3, you might be noticing a similarity with the Upside Down, the dark dimension, with the black thorns and the faceless entities and all. You might be thinking, did I rip off Stranger Things? No. These books were written in the early 1990s, almost 30 years ago. Because this stuff is real, but that's something I'll get into a little later. Like Kubrick, it's a fictional movie, but what it's talking about is not fiction. You get me? Every one of my books begins with based on a true story. That's not a lie. This is a story about that truth, but the truth is true. So the Upside Down, if you will, I just call it the outer darkness, or the chaos realm, or the nemesis, or the void, or the nemesis void, or whatever combination you want. Just generic terms of bad, don't want it here. So it's also applicable in your own life's experience to whatever you need it to be. like the force that inspired the generation. And they could apply it to their lives however they wanted. More metaphysical, more magical, more Fantasia, more fun. That evokes the spirit. You know, that's why kids can see ghosts more readily than adults. They still got that light inside, like Oliver and Excelsior, who are the hardest to corrupt. You notice they're the ones that the incarnation of chaos, the Chaos Lord Sindar, could not defeat. They got the Grail through. Mission accomplished. It's like the Ring of Sauron could not corrupt hobbits as easily as elves or men or dwarves or whatever, because of their innocent nature, their childish spirit. They don't need all that crap. They don't need politics in their fantasy. Throne you very much. Eat my house. Rawr. This is Oliver just before his tipping point. We cut those scenes out. We wait till he's totally, he's at least got to be half in the bag, before I start writing his scenes. Where time doesn't matter anyway, so when the linear time becomes less of a thing, well, he's like, yeah, so what? And Excelsior is immortal to begin with. She's like, woohoo! Not afraid of ghosts. I ain't afraid of no ghost. Pretty chakra tree, Christmas tree lights. Oh, definitely one day Oliver and Excelsior got to record a Yuletide album. If this stuff ever becomes popular, or I get filk fiction or something, if someone's cosplaying at a con, my characters, Oliver and Excelsior definitely got to get totally loaded like Merry and Pippin and have a jam session. Excelsior can sing and dance, Oliver plays, and that will happen many times in this book. There's one scene I'm particularly fond of where they're about to meet my equivalent of Treebeard, a character called Old Man Stone. It's like a waterfall and such, and they're trying to open the gates of Moria kind of thing. What do we do? And Old Man Stone speaks. Well, actually, before that, Excelsior's dancing around the pool, and Oliver's playing, and I love to parody songs. Obviously, you may have detected my Tolkien poetry. Some of it is mine, but some of it, it's like Weird Al, it's a 50-50. Some of it is clearly Hobbit parody of pop culture. Just a stylistic choice. Just an artistic choice. And in this particular one, it's playing off the crystals with Kissed Me. I just think it would make for a beautiful trailer shot. So I picture things in my head cinematically. Already edited in post. And back engineered, constructed layer by layer. Down to the wardrobe and the location scouting. I picture it, how it would be filmed, and that's how I put it to text. That's part of the polishing I've done since the last draft of these decades ago. The last draft I wrote of these books was in the late 90s, but after a lifetime of experience in entertainment storytelling, I developed a better language, a more versatile one. Like Excelsior, I get life experience. It helps me deal with the darkness of, for example, conformity for marketing purposes. No, thank you. My schedule's my own. My word count's my own. I'm not out to make money. I don't have to answer to any demographic. I can let the story be pure. Back to the world of chaos and the darkness coming into the world. It will manifest more and more until, mild spoilers, by the climax of Book 6. Picture Minas Tirith in Lord of the Rings looking more like Singe's castle, the opening of Dragon's Lair, just lost in the black thorny wilderness of darkness. Minas Tirith is looking more like the Fortress of Ultimate Darkness in Time Bandits. With some stops at the Overlook Hotel along the way. Oh, and Stranger Things, let's not forget that. So, the darkness comes in and time becomes more and more distorted. There's a lot of hidden references, Easter eggs, if you will, treasures to be found. 100 points. As you run the gauntlet, see if you can detect them all. There's probably one every page, some riddle of some kind or a reference to something in the military-industrial entertainment complex. When they go see the High Blue Wizard, NORAD, count the stairs. The military has things so deep. Or, you know about 432 hertz? Look for that somewhere. Things like that. I'd love to be Stanley Kubrick, I understand, played chess a lot with Steve Martin, or vice versa. I would love to have had both those guys at my game table, or been at theirs. I would love to have role-play gamed with Kubrick and Steve Martin and George Lucas. Just, they could appreciate the layering of things in there. Steve Martin, yeah. I mean, you gotta have Oliver in there. If I was doing a live action and I wasn't casting a little person or a midget as Oliver, if I was going to do the forced perspective thing, well, I'd have to find a very tall Excelsior, which wouldn't work. But let's just say I did. Steve Martin might be a good casting choice, at least if he was younger. He's kind of old now. But just that sort of good old SNL goofiness. I could picture Oliver doing the King Tut. Just for whatever reason. In front of the king or something. Just... And anyway, as the darkness encroaches more upon the world, as it is in our world, time becomes less certain. And it becomes relative. And this is another place that becomes very confusing for people, but all the more applicable to our, quote, current world. And that is that people talk about Schrodinger's cat and the Mandela effect and such parlor tricks. Such simple things. What if there was an age of the world that's, some people say, well, maybe it's real to some people because we're in multiple dimensions. Well, why do you think I called my game company New Dimension Games 22 years ago? Got my business license in 2000. I wasn't afraid of Y2K or 2012 or the Big Bad Wolf. Not even Fenris Wolf. He's not going to devour the world on my watch. Jesus said get a sword, but he didn't use it. And when he did, they deleted that from his own book, The Gospels of Thomas. I like that name. No, I'm more Nordic. I'm more gamer. I'm going to take that holy weapon and use it. Not afraid to. For some people, some things may be real, but imagine if for some people they had literally suffered so much and lived through such harrowing times that for them, that literally was hundreds of years. But for the more innocent you are, the more optimistic you are, the more light you have within, it's only been a couple of years. Think of the difference of the fairy realm. Everyone got that one easy. You go in the fairy realm for a day, you come back, 100 years have passed. Well, Oliver has experience in the fairy realm. You notice the last 2 books I've been setting that up. From Missing 411 type of stuff with his bright colors and hobbits known for bare feet, meeting up with Sasquatch in book 2, then disappearing into the fairy kingdom in book 3. He knows his way behind the scenes. The fool will find the way. Don't need a Gollum guide. And Excelsia, she's elven. This is second nature to her. She's of the fair folk, the demi-humans. She knows what fairies are. For her, the fairy realm is just like... her going to the fairy realm would just be like any one of us going to a foreign country. Where they speak a different language. It'd take a little adapting, but not so much. Especially if you're used to travel. You know, like you're one of those that just backpacks Europe or whatever. So things are going to get a little weirder as they go on. The classic adventuring linear narrative is done. It's not just that the fellowship has been scattered. Time is fractured. Everything is strongly symbolic. This is why the darkness targets the royalty, like the maimed king in book 3 with the dolorous stroke and the Grail quest. You kill the king, it's like in chess, you win the game. You take out the morale of the people. Symbolically, you take them. In book 5, there is a similar scenario where the target is, it's kind of like the Terminator. Take out Sarah Connor, take out John Connor. Well, they didn't take out King Connor, so they're going to go after Princess Connor. And there you have your classic Dragon's Lair. Don Bluth's Dragon's Lair is a strong influence in my work. And, I mean, to this day, I have had for 32 years now a fully operable stand-up arcade Dragon's Lair machine. It's in the picture you see of the tavern. You rotate the camera 180 degrees. There's a Dragon's Lair, a Space Ace, and a 4-player Dungeons & Dragons Tower of Doom. I used to have a 4-player WrestleFest 1991 with the Royal Rumble, but it got beat to hell and worn out, and I donated it. I fixed the buttons and donated it. I didn't want to smash it with Sledge-O-Matic. If I had weed, though, man, I should have kept it. Oh well. Only so much room in that little room, though. The little tavern game room thing that never really sees much anymore. Ah, well. The legacy of a life, like the legacy of Dragonstarr. Named after an old, honorable character in my very early roleplay games. There's great symbolic importance there with my long-lost brother. And in this book, while you have Excelsia and Oliver on the quest, they are not alone. Just like Crystal had her fellowship to help her, so too does Excelsia have some new characters. And, well, there's not as many new characters. Only 3, really, whereas Crystal had 6. That was, their stories are similar but different. It's like poetry, they rhyme. And they do. Wee wee woo woo. Wonka wheelie. Just like Crystal, we did not know her backstory, or Ariel. We know Excelsia's. We know why Excelsia's all messed up. We know where her character arc begins and what she's got to overcome. Whereas Crystal, we had no clue. She had no clue. There was more characters in that because with book one, I had a lot more responsibility than just telling Crystal's story because it wasn't there to be told. It was a mystery for 2/3 of the book anyway. So that time was spent in a bit of world building. And not just the maps and the details that you can put in a game. I mean the style, the tone of my world and my storytelling style, my storytonal style, whatever. Storytone. And that is that, first of all, characters will die, and even seemingly randomly. Establishing that role-playing game theme that sometimes the dice just turn on you, man. But I don't want to just have a random story because that's not good storytelling. You got to have your dramatic... you want to choose your character deaths for maximum dramatic effect, and you want to have the story make sense and such. And you want to have it mean something. So I have it mean, well, you see the beginnings of chaos. The more chaotic characters, the more the mercenary, the quicker they went. Anyone ever notice that? And, or the chaos they were facing, like the Thanator, darkness incarnate. A big sludge booger worm thing of pure evil, or pure chaos. Everything out of order, bad vibrations. And I wanted you to also know major characters would go. So throughout the rest of the saga, you'd never have that certainty of, well, they're a hero, they're going to live, of course. Well, not necessarily. That ups the stakes. It ups the ante of excitement. Makes it a more engaging story. You know, the heroes don't have the plot armor, you know. And in my fantasy role-playing game, there's no resurrections, really. You die, you can roll up a new character. And you don't just get to transfer your stuff with royalty. You got to earn points to do that. Otherwise, it's like, as a game master, I'm like the IRS. I'll tax you when you get it, and I'll tax your next character too. And I'll tax everyone else in the group and their next characters. I just don't want people to just... It's like, you know, you don't want... this is another reason I don't like politics. Supposed to have voting, right? No, there's just dynasties and new royalties. Bushes, Clintons, and all the rest. It's just... it's ugly. It's not what I want in my fantasy. That's why I get to fantasy. I want to get away from the real world. And... you know, everyone should have a fair chance. In my games, no one character class or ability score is more important than another or more tactically valuable. I want there to be that sincerity of life, that anything is possible. Make it exciting, make it fun. Have an adventure. So, Crystal did and set the tone for the world. And she has more story to tell. That will come. In the meantime, though, she's got to hold the gates against the darkness while everyone else does the behind-the-scenes stuff. That's my way of taking the powerful wizard character and they can't help the party. Superman's got to have kryptonite, you know. Or in the case of the elves, she needs people around who, besides Oliver, who can fight, because well, elves aren't all powerful. My game system is balanced. Sometimes you need the big old dumb humans. Welcome, our new party members. How appropriate. Let us begin with Gron from the village in the north. Fear me. In honor of my brother, you'll meet Gron from the village in the north. The big bald blacksmith with the classic Fu Manchu mustache and pirate attitude is in the party this time. He'll take the place of the usual boisterous dwarf. He's just a big boisterous dwarf in spirit. And then there is Valkamar, or Valkam, depending on your... Well, you have your preferences. He's the equivalent of Sir Rannan in Book 1, a knight of the heart of the Red Order of Cronin, just not as experienced. He's younger, and he's got his issues with the demands of honor. He's not quite as dedicated or as zealous as Sir Rannan. He's a bit more young. He's got his own life lessons to learn. Excelsia's already learned those. She's in a different place. So someone else can bounce that young stuff. And he plays off Gron well, because it's sort of like Valkamar is like Luke Skywalker, Gron is like Han Solo. One's young and naive, the other's cynical and world-weary. Younger and older. And it's a road movie, so they can help out each other. And then, of course, there's the group dynamic of Oliver and Excelsia thrown in that. And then later on, we got to have our Obi-Wan Kenobi. I already mentioned the Blue Wizard, Norad. The High Blue Wizard. Every novel has one of the High Wizards in it, if only for a short while. Last book, you met the High Green Wizard, Calistarn, Lord of the Elves. And in Book 5, you will meet the High Violet Lady, Andromeda, the new one, after the successor to Diana from Book 1. Book 2, you met Avatar the Gold briefly, though you may not have noticed, but the whole book was a road movie. Follow the yellow brick road, the golden light. His presence is there, and you may or may not have seen him, but the road should have no identity other than the road. Norad is very much the waves of the sea. For the first time, Fantasia will be going off-land. They're going to take a ship to find the legacy of Dragonstarr. For Excelsia, though she has no issue with her sister, there's no sibling rivalry or jealousy or anything, there is that question of, does she have the potential of her sister? Like, what if Excelsia studied the books and became the apprentice of Nebulous rather than Crystal? How well might she have fared at the job? How apt is she with magic if she were to get, like, the Jedi training? How powerful could she really be? If she has the inner self-mastery, if she can get over her high school crush and those coming-of-age complications enough to pick up her own lightsaber and kick some ass. Trailer scene. Somewhere in this novel, probably closer to the finale, you can tell by the backgrounds of siege warfare, Excelsia has herself a BFS. It's like a BFG, but it's a sword. And she's going one-on-one with the Chaos Lord. He whom the entire fellowship could not fell together. Now she must face alone. Sindar. Just as Crystal faced Drax. Except Sindar's not a one-book character. She has a greater challenge and less power. Gotta up the stakes. So, where does she get that big-ass sword? I mean, that big Fantasia sword. Well, gotta go beyond Fantasia for that. Over the horizon. To a place that is intuitively accurate, although in your world its manifestation has been perverted. I'm referring to what the Star Wars sequels could have been, George Lucas's original notes, some of which survived into the Disney abominations. And that would be Skellig Michael, or Saint Michael, the island, great Saint Skellig off of the west coast of Ireland. Just bigger, much bigger. But an ancient island burial graveyard, the remnants of Atlantis, which is what it is, along with places like Skara Brae and the last of the Hyperborean pre-Ice Age world. But in this case, in the fantasy world, it's going to be a lot bigger than that little island. And somewhere on it is the tomb of Sir Eric Dragonstarr, the champion of the Dragon Lords, or the High Wizards of old. While Crystal may bear the amulet and be the boss of the council, Dragonstarr was like Sir Eric was like the Sir Jenner of the ancient world. And Excelsior has come to respect that power, to not only see the value in a warrior, but to fall in love with one. How much of a warrior could she become? She doesn't need to be a wizard. Crystal's got that covered. Can't go any higher than the white anyway. She's head of the council. Don't make them compete. One would always be lesser than the other. They're twins. And Excelsior's not suited for study anyway. She doesn't like to be caged. Crystal don't mind sitting down and going through books. She digs it. If Crystal's one of those that probably watches forensic shows, you know, just study. Crystal's a bookworm. She's a nerd. Excelsior's a party animal. she's an athlete. She's a tomboy. She wants to learn to fight. Crystal is Arwen. Excelsior is Eowyn. Different character. So, I'm going to see how much of a warrior she can become to be worthy of her lost love. To fight with herself, compete with herself. Rather than competing with the Chaos Lord and all the world going dark, she doesn't let Plato's cave control her. She learns self-mastery. She learns balance. Just picture Ramirez teaching MacLeod. The metaphor of the sword master being balanced is just like all of life's engagements. Stay centered in your circle. Don't let people draw you out of it, because then they have the advantage. Don't lose your head. So, high school crush, grief-stricken, don't know nothing, welcome to the real world in a time of war. Gotta live up to the reputation, don't live in the shadow of my sister Excelsia. Now she gotta learn to fight Kurgan, too. Well, this should be a fun road trip. I think the Griswolds have a better time on their vacations. But we, as a whole bunch of perverse, introverted, universal nerds, we get to just watch from a safe distance. We're along for the ride, but we're not in any real danger. You have fun, Excelsia. Oliver, have fun. Have fun storming the castle. Or actually have fun defending the castle. The castle of Terrace-Isle, or Terrace-Isle, or Terrace-Isle. The terraced island. Think of a British earth fort, like actual ancient Camelot. Ancient Britannia is full of ringed earthworks, tiered natural castles. But like Skellig Michael, think of it just on a grand scale, like in a fantasy world, where everything's bigger. Castles, dragons, swords. Yeah. It's a cartoon, it's an amplification, because when you're a child and you've got that sense of wonder, everything in the world is bigger. Not just the grown-ups being taller, but the world's full of wonder. Everything is scary. What's that noise outside? What's that? You know, it's you retain that spirit and you're able to tap your imagination so much better. You get the mind of a child. It's like when you're giddy with the kids at Christmas, you can appreciate the holidays more, right? When you're thinking more like a kid and the world seems bigger and more amplified and exaggerated, well, then you can enjoy the fantasy world more. And that's why I keep the tone that I do of not getting adult with sex or politics. Smoking and drinking, sure, but that's just kids with candy. They see adults do it and assume it's candy, you know? It's just like when kids see the scene in Jaws when Chief Brody is at the table and he's folding his fingers and his kid is mimicking him. Or a Short Round with Indiana Jones when they're being told about the Temple of Doom, you know, Short Round's mimicking him. You know, that's Oliver. That's all of us. Aha. I give you the world to do that, and I don't do anything to disrupt it, to take you out of that moment. It's like a good buzz. I don't want to be a buzzkill for fantasy. I want you to have a good time. I want you to have a good dream. I want you to have fun. So I put you in that kid zone, that kid mentality. That's what George Lucas did with Star Wars. That was just 2001: A Space Odyssey for a childish perspective. It's still the same perspective of the camera. Go look at it, almost shot for shot. The Millennium Falcon arriving in the Death Star, the big light bar around it. Go look when they arrive on the Saturn or wherever, or the moon up in 2001. It's the same shot. It's the same occult meanings to everything, too. Which I understand well enough and put into this, too. As always, everything is written totally stoned. Helps a child's perspective. Helps me maintain one. I only write these things when I'm at peak buzz. So I get the best of that child's mood. I don't write these when I'm really depressed. I'm not working that stuff out. When I'm stoned, I have it from experience. I have the knowledge. I can direct the movie. I get it. I know what works and doesn't work. I filter out the bad and I keep the good for the story. Like a child only wants the stuff that works for his fantasy. Get everything else out of the Lego pile. Give everyone a chance to be reborn with this not in like a religious sense or even a spiritual sense, just fantasy sense. Everyone's fantasy is so polluted and complicated. I'm not plagiarizing Tolkien when I'm quoting him about I avoid allegory. I always did naturally before I even knew what that meant or ever heard that coming from the professor. That's just the sensible way to do it. But everyone's got an agenda because everyone's trying to publish and make money, fortune, and glory. I'm into Illumination Junior. And as I said, I write these for myself. My agenda, my time, my editing, no pressure. And they're true stories. They're how I think. Every one of these characters is a reflection of me. Excelsior and Oliver are my good side, my childhood side that I preserved. Probably one of the reasons is my favorite book. Books 5 and 6 get increasingly dark and depressing. Yeah, it has to. I mean, the war's coming. It's got to get bad, or it's not exciting. Heroes don't just wade through things. Got to keep raising the stakes. Things got to go bad. Main characters will die. In fact, the breaking of the Fellowship isn't the worst defeat the heroes will face before the end. Book 5 is definitely my Empire Strikes Back, going much darker in tone. Although Book 6 is not my Return of the Jedi. That's more Book 7, but it gets a bit different there. Kind of like it did with Lucas. It didn't go quite the way he wanted it to either. But then, there are no perfect timelines. There is no one linear path. It's all the choices we make in this grand game of fate. Our destiny is a dance with the choices we're presented with. Themes of my books is themes I explore inherently throughout all the characters. And Book 6 is, well, it's not my Return of the Jedi. There really is no Return of the Jedi, because that's not the way Lucas wanted it anyway. When he was originally going to make, a prequel and a sequel trilogy, bam bam, so we would have had Episode 9 by 1992, and I was writing Book 2 here. The whole Princess Leia thing was going to be the whole story arc of 7, 8, 9. It was just all rushed and crammed into 6. Well, I had time to explore my stuff, so Book 6 is kind of like my Return of the King, where there's the big old battle, and there's a considerable, I guess, Return of the Jedi's level, exoteric level of victory and closure to the story. You could stop reading at Book 6. There's a lot of epilogue. It's like 100 pages of epilogue, and here's what happened to whatever characters went on to yada yada. Book 7 is, how do we stop this all from happening all over again? Because anyone can manifest chaos. How do we stop a new Sauron from forging a new ring? One last quest. And then that's just a big old grand old super finale that'll be like the length of a whole trilogy of books in and of itself. It'll be the length of at least 2, maybe 3 by the time I'm done with the revision, just because of the amount of esoteric detail that needs to be. It's there, but I need to clarify it. I got the registered copies with Library of Congress 2001 on Book 7. I can't make it up now. But I have more understanding after 21 years of research and experience to make a better movie. It's like DeMille. You know, he made the Ten Commandments in black and white, and then he went back and made it in color. You know, one was a little better than the other. Actually, they were just different, but you get the idea. Okay. Now, clearly this book, like all of them, isn't the end of the story, but it does have its own story arc. Each character has their own arc. And then book 5 will begin simultaneously. Like I said, you could actually read them in whatever order. You could even start with book 6 and read up until a point where certain characters return. When you start reading book 6, and then when you get to the point where, okay, mild spoiler, some of the characters from books 4 and 5 show up in book 6. Kind of like Return of the King, when the Rohirrim show up, and then, you know, the army, well, in the Aragorn shows up. In the books, he does not take the army of the dead to Minas Tirith, but whatever. That's a triviality there. You get the point. You could start with book 5, then read book 4, then book 6. You could read them in any combo. Time is nonlinear. It's just like the same. It's the same reason you may notice starting with book 2, when Crystal says that really the war has begun. There is a Chaos Lord now. It's like a ring has been forged. An entity of chaos exists now. In book 1, Crystal stopped Drax from becoming that, and then 4 years later, oh damn, here we go, and it's like this, you know, the other superpower has developed a super weapon, you know. Now we got to stop it, and hence why after book 6, it's like, now let's not ever have this happen again. And so it is. The last crusade, actually. It's how some of the party members at that time look at it as a crusade, others as a quest, others as an adventure, others as a duty. Every one of the characters has their own perspective, just as I do. Multiple perspectives in this world, to say the least. But again, the choice is yours to see what you want in it. Have fun. With rediscovering that childhood, imagine if you could watch Star Wars Episode 4 again for the first time. Not that I'm putting myself on that same level of quality. That would be presumptuous. I'm just saying that's the tone I'm going for. And if you like that sort of thing, maybe you'll like this. And again, with the childhood perspective, you think of Star Wars. It too, classic Star Wars, real Star Wars. We're talking the original 3 movies, no more, no less. Special edition, fine, I don't care. That's a triviality in this case. What I'm talking about is that those movies are really just free of politics and sex and grown-up things. It's all children running around the playground. Luke, Leia, and Han, and Chewie, and R2 and 3PO, and Obi-Wan around, running around the Death Star is kids at recess, or kids running around the neighborhood. Princess Leia's the tomboy. Han Solo's the older kid that probably smokes and has done some juvenile detention, been held back a grade or 2. Chewbacca's the dog. It's like the Little Rascals or something. Or My Gang or whatever. It's just... I've never seen any of their stuff. Who else has a dog? It's Calvin and Hobbes. No, he didn't have enough friends. Well, he's got plenty in his mind, but let's see, it's Scooby-Doo and crew. And as in a fantasy sense, it's even more applicable than Star Wars, because instead of Death Stars and deserts, we have trees. Well, I guess you have Endor, but a lot of Star Wars are environments that we don't have access to, but a lot of us have grown up around trees, climbing in trees, fields, the Shire, little rivers. We can appreciate a road movie through the fantasy wilderness. We can dream that much more readily, especially with childish characters like Excelsia and Oliver. You know, our friends that we went climbing trees and playing pirate on the river or whatever you did. You can more easily picture that in your mind. You can more easily hear the rustle of the leaves, smell the flora of the forest, and thus filling in the blanks with my narrative to guide you to imagine those fairies in the trees or trolls or whatever it may be. You can more readily go there. And again, not just with metachlorians, but with sex. I don't do anything to take you out of that. No politics, no non-fantasy, no fun stuff. Star Wars never needed a sex scene, and we loved it. Never even had a naughty word. I think the worst thing said in Star Wars was Han Solo to the officer on the Echo Base? Yeah, Hoth. I'll see you in hell. And that was the worst we got in Star Wars. But we all loved it, right? I like it when there's a few times Excelsia, we get more in. It's subtly sexual. It's like superheroes wearing spandex. It plays upon that nerve, but it doesn't need to go that far. That's too much. Just a playful vibe. And actually, in that sense, back to what I was saying earlier about elves may be immortal, but everything in my game is balanced. And as chaos begins to pick up in the world, one of the subplots you will start to really get in this book is I play upon Elves' Bane, the old legend of iron being like Wolves' Bane to elves, or Kryptonite to Superman, or I guess in this case Supergirl. You have that's another subtle sexual dynamic, the whole Kryptonite weakening thing. But if I'm gonna do that story, I'm gonna do it with a lady and not a dude. Sorry, I'm heterosexual. I'm a dude. But I never go there. You know, it's just implied. So if that's one of your fetishes, there will be a Excelsia Kryptonite weakening kind of scenes in this. Superman Kryptonite scenes. That's just all part of the psychological treasure trove, all the Halloween candy for consciousness you're getting here. Sort of things I put in my stories. You don't need sex scenes when you got Kryptonite. It's much more sophisticated storytelling. And it's much more visually cool. Except it's not glowing green stones so much. I actually studied gemology. I learned all about crystallite and all this other stuff. I actually, if you're into gems and geology or whatever, try me. I run this past the King of the Dwarves, and Gron the blacksmith has a... I play upon, in medieval times, people, you know, the smithies were a gilded thing. And I don't mean like golden cage. I mean, well, kind of in a way, but they were a guild-operated thing. The early Masons came from the same tradition as in the Freemasons. Blacksmiths were almost akin to sorcerers because they would have to keep their trade secrets. It's like the recipe for Coca-Cola. The recipe to make a special metal would have been worthy of the king's privilege back in those days. So there's a certain degree of mystery to blacksmiths, and I play that up a little bit because my brother was always a mystery to me. I always looked up to him. My one older sibling, who legally changed his name from Darren DeMille to Gron Morgan some years ago, and well, my parents take that harder than I do. I'm a fan of Warrior, aka Jim Hellwig, so who am I to complain? But I did register this with the Copyright Office back in the mid-1995 for this book. So, and the revision was 1999. So what year did you change your name, bro? Just making sure here. But it's really a tribute to you. It's a love letter to my lost brother. A lot of inside jokes probably only he will ever get if he reads it, but anything Gron does in this book is either an homage or tribute to my brother, or might have even been based on something he really did in one of my role-playing games. A lot of the humor in my books comes from my old game sessions. It's stuff that actually got laughs at game tables, so I gamble on that working better than just stuff I would pull out of my ass. Like another can of beer. Now that's an Oliver moment. Hobbit humor sometimes falls on pointy ears. I mean deaf ears. Oh yes, elves have pointy ears in this world. Imagine Lilu with a little bit of an elven trim and a sword. Might even be better than chicken. Yeah. Oh, that's another thing I explore in this. Elves and their veganism. Already I've done that, you might have noticed. I believe it was in book 2. Excelsia sometimes will eat meat. It's like Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom. You know, you eat what you're offered. It's a matter of courtesy. It's like the animal's already dead. I'm not going to let it go to waste. I try to explore these traditional things so you don't have to go far from home. You're comfortable in this tour through my world. I don't want to Jurassic Park you and intrude with my politics. I just want to give you a chance to explore these themes that you already love, because otherwise why are you reading a fantasy adventure book? But I want to give you a chance to indulge them, not make you feel guilty for them or confuse the issue. That's Excelsia. Okay, the animal's already dead. You're offering me meat. I'm not going to change the world. You know what? I think I'm going to enjoy this animal. I'm going to make the most of this. That's Excelsia's attitude. I'm going to make the most out of everything in life. She really reflects my good side. I really like writing that character. It brings out the best in me. And Oliver, too. They're a great combo. So, of course, I have to offset them with my brother. Am I working out issues? Kind of. I blur it. I grew up with Darren Gron, but he also reflects the Freemasons, because when I was polishing this book was around the time I was joining them. And when Oliver sings to Gron, he's paraphrasing from The Man Who Would Be King. Who follows in his train? Brothers to the end. Like Kane and Undertaker? Kind of. Darren and I are more like Kane and Undertaker. But I don't think he wants to acknowledge I exist anymore. When he talks to my parents, he never mentions me, never brings me up. I think he's afraid that a little wet behind the ears, never going to get out of mommy's basement, Matt DeMille went further in life than any of them can ever imagine. You know, Han Solo having to be rescued by Luke Skywalker must have been really hard on his ego. But he learned. I hold out hope for my brother one day. I'll never give up on him, even if he gave up on me decades ago. He stood right where my ass is planted back in 2001 and told me I didn't deserve to exist. Those weren't my parents, those were his parents, and it was really ugly. I know, it was 1999, actually. I was already, how did I say 2001? Oh, because I said that earlier. Sorry, a little buzzed. But it was 1999, and I was already suffering from Zoe Feist Episode 1's betrayal, and the perversion of my relationship with the first Scarlet Woman, whom Excelsia is a template. It's all that archetype of that symbology. I was cost love, and while I'm sitting in this room grieving about it, he comes in here and tells me basically I should die. Feel the brotherly love, but you know what? You read Excelsia and Oliver together, and well, you can read about Gron with them and see how it goes. And that goes for the Masons too, brothers. I mentioned that Valkymer has a bit of difficulty with the demands of the knighthood versus, say, what is actually right. He's not Sir Rannin about it, dogmatic till the end, not blindly loyal. That's not his arc. Rannin's arc was to learn. He was modeled after a lot of my old evangelical friends who thought role-playing games and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom were evil because that's what their parents were brainwashed by the TV and and the church. But that was Rannin learned in the end that there's more than that, and he learned what was really important to the ultimate sacrifice. He learned love. That was an interesting arc, but it was only one book. Obviously, he's been back, and he's got a whole new arc now. Valkymer he's younger. He has a different arc. He has to deal with honor, and basically his issue is with his captains and dogma. He's the military guy who questions orders. He's that kind of character. And Gron is like being convinced to actually follow orders. Any orders. So maybe they'll meet in the middle. Or something. And then Norad's off to the side, all smoking and boozing with Oliver. Is like, let's get back to the game session, please. Yeah. So. Oh, that one went down bad. Bit of a spell failure there. Why don't the High Wizards get involved more? Why are they only cameos? Well, exoterically, narratively, if you have powerful characters around, it ruins the drama for everybody else. So the real reason, the excuse, is that, and I really get into this in Book 7, when you have not only the Last Crusade, or the Last Quest, but also the Last Council. The High Wizards, and this power belongs to an earlier age of the world. These crystals, what to do about them. Someone will always be trying to gain the power. It upsets the balance. A new Chaos Lord will appear. It's like the Ring of Doom question. Maybe there shouldn't be masters of magic. Maybe magic should belong to all mortal kind. All that these books are doing, if you pay attention throughout the narratives, is they are setting up the stereotypical gaming world. These books take place roughly 100 or 200 years before, about 100 years before the campaign setting of my Fantasia. These books take place, Book 1 takes place in the year 1297. Book 4 is taking place in the year 1302. Book 7 takes place in 1307. Just like the Templars in real life. Yeah, I didn't know that when I made those numbers. It's just one of those many things that turned out to be accurate. Along with all the Masonic rituals I put in these things. Way back, yeah. Anyway, the where was I? Oh yeah, the books take place on those dates, whereas the game campaign starts around the year 1400. So when Tolkien wrote Middle-earth and set the standard for the genre, he ended poetically, for his own reasons, that the elves are leaving Middle-earth and it's a time of men. That was just his choice. But because everyone's being a poor man's token and they mimic everything he does like a child, but they never mature and do their own thing. For some reason, all these fantasy movies and stories always got to end with magic fizzling out and disappearing from the world. And I don't agree with that. I go to fantasy because I like fantasy. I don't like that downer at the end that it's all gone. I got to go back to the real world anyway. I'll get that soon enough. So I made a conscious choice from the very beginning with my fantasy novels that it was going to end the total opposite way. That at the end of my novels, there's actually more magic in the world. And because there's been a big war of these higher beings and ages before and all this history that's only alluded to and all these realms of the map that are only mentioned, and well, that's a ripe setting for a role-playing game, wouldn't you say? Yeah. So it's all about setting up the game world. I don't want there to be super-powered gamer characters. I like lower level stuff because it's closer to childhood. I like exploring ruins more than having godly characters. So at the end of this, in a way, I kind of down magic because I get rid of this, it's always about the big world-saving stuff, and I set the stage for the role-playing game world, which is the everyman setting. Kids that play in the backwoods with treasure. Fun stuff. The wreckage and ruins and remnants of this world. So you don't have to worry about this noble, heroic stuff. You can just go play the game and roll the dice and have a good time. You can get all lofty and world-saving if you want. I have those sorts of adventures, but majority of my stuff, all the adventures I ever wrote for Fantasia, were inconsequential to the larger world. They were your story to make of what you will. See, Fantasia. I don't want to rope you into a world-saving plot with my self-indulgent characters. That story's been told. Go tell your story. I've set the stage for you. Fantasia can mean whatever you want it to mean. That's the beauty of it. That's the real magic. That's the tone of this novel. Which, now, just like a trailer, they got to give you a bunch of rush shots at the end to really build you up. Right. Let's see, what's some stuff, just going through it in my head. Some really cool stuff that I think was just really nifty. They say to write what you know. Write what you like. You'll know what you like. There's plenty of things I know, but I don't want to write about. But I do want to write about Oliver lounging in the riverside town tavern where there's old wine barrels that they've turned into steam baths, and he's just totally enjoying being a guest of the king. Oh yeah, King's got all the best stuff. The stories he'll have to share when he gets back home. Woo-hoo-hoo. The recipes he'll bring back. Woo-hoo-hoo. Oh, that's an Oliver laugh if I ever heard one. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Something like that. If I was a director, I'd give that to the actor to play with. It's sort of like a hiccup mixed with Pee-wee. Pee-wee Herman had hiccups. Epileptic Pee-wee. No offense, Jessica was too. My fiance, so don't get me with that one. By the way, cannabis counters it. Something they didn't want her to know. They brainwashed her against that. Well, Excelsia's got PTS, so does Oliver. It's going to be a bumpy road, folks, as they go through. They leave Cronin on a quest I won't spoil for you, although it does have something to do with Lord Eric Dragonstarr. But along the old road, along the southern shores of Cronin, the Holy Kingdom, en route and return to Roland, the Enchanted Kingdom, they will pass by, they will cross rivers and kind of do some Masonic stuff I didn't know at the time. I was just like doing game stuff like rivers and token stuff like little hills and forests and stairs and columns and arches and secret quest, mission, adventure stuff for what might be called clandestine stuff. Or Masons have a slightly different use for that term, but they're all mixed in one when the party stops at the ancient ruin, deserted temple full of countless candles called Candlestein. What is Candlestein? It's an interesting place. Well, it's only a stop on the road to Gorvillestein. There's some big time stuff goes down at Gorvillestein. Legions of orcs laying siege to ancient sanctuary. You ever watch the old Dungeons and Dragons cartoon? There's a lot of that in this book. And beyond Gorvillestein, there is the third of these ancient sites. Off the coast, beyond maps. The remote island of ancient cemetery. Dragon Deep. City of Tanis is one of the possible resting places. I mean, the Dragon Deep is one of the possible resting places of the tomb of Sir Eric Dragonstarr. Well, who'd go there? Excelsior smiles. Me. Multipass. And, where was her sister as she was becoming all this, holding the two towers of Roland City and Terrasil against the onslaught of the enemy? Well, Crystal can only guard one of those two cities at a time. So where do you think the enemy is going to attack? When Excelsior comes to Terrasil, she doesn't come alone. She comes with Oliver. And all of her companions. Including, well, dragon lords do talk to dragons. Nowadays, from Game of House of Dragon Thrones, everybody's got a dragon jockey. My copyright date's from the mid-90s. I'm not worried about that, but I just want to know what's so special about getting in front of a green screen and writing a special, not so special effect. Why don't you earn it? Save it like a Rocky fight to the end of the movie. Give me 2 hours of build-up first. Show me going the distance. Excelsior Everfair is no Mary Ray Sue Palpatine. She will earn it. Yeah. You call her Lady Everfair Doll. My professional name. And Norad smokes his pipe. Looking on with that wry old wise mentor bushy eyebrow smile. That means he's going to be checking out the story soon. Next book is of a different color. Every book is of a different color. Book 4 is blue. Color of water. Going to the island. Excelsior loving the baths and springs and pools, waterfalls, little rivers. The closest to myself in kindred spirit in a way. I've always liked swimming pools and waterfalls and things. Fountains. I guess it's fate that I was presented with the choice and took it. That my habit, my vice, my spiritual path would be a water pipe. My holy symbol would be... well, maybe it's a pot leaf, but whatever. The holy vessel, gotta have one of these on the altar at my church, or it's not a proper mass. You don't want grass? You can kiss my mushroom. Right or left? Kiss my little shrooms. That's what Oliver would tell you. Oh wait, the little shrooms. Or the big shrooms. You can kiss either one you want. The little shrooms are my lips. Why'd you... You know, Oliver never really... There's another thing about Oliver and Excelsior that I love to play with, and that's the big sister, little brother thing. I think I always wanted a sister, an older sister. Not sure why. Maybe I had in previous life had a good friendship or something. But they have that dynamic going on as well, where Oliver, being the fool, the jester, just like the jester in a court has special privilege no one else does, like he alone can mock the king. Well, I don't spend time in court, so I don't get the stage to do that. But that's a small price to pay. It's like not owning a cell phone. Well, there's a few things I can't do, but there's a lot of worry I don't have. A lot of baggage I don't have. But you have to do it somewhere. Oliver is the fool that can get away with anything with Excelsior, and vice versa. They can flirt shamelessly with each other. I think that Oliver has like a puppy crush on her. I mean, he's got his own lost love he's been talking about the whole journey. And that's based on a real person. Not mine, but just someone close to the family. But it's one of those things that you can always apply what you want it to mean. And not saying I'll never answer it, but it's not important to answer it. It's just important that it's there. It's important that you feel Oliver's pain more than you get the specifics of the story. The esoteric is far more important than the exo. What applies to you is far more important than what applies to them. Never let my stories become some sort of religious canon and be dogmatized. But Oliver doesn't have like a love for Excelsior. He's not like jealous of Jenner or anything like that. But he has like a puppy crush on her. She's the... Yeah, his educator on love. If you know, he looks up to her in a way, and she actually looks up to him, and he doesn't get it. He gives her courage when she doesn't have it. Just like the sun and the moon, they complement each other. but in a neutral way. The divine feminine and masculine in an innocent way. A natural way, just like the sun and moon. But Oliver, she'll, tease him in ways she'll never tease anyone else. She'll put her hands on Oliver in ways she'll never do, sort of like to ha-ha anyone else. Now, if it was anyone other than Excelsia, I'd say she's a cock tease, that biatch in high school that knows she's the best looking and taunts people with it. And that's just the person that's waiting to play a game of grab ass when she's out there having in the bar or the club having a few too many drinks, and a few of the guys who are like in the military are going to say, oh, time for some grab ass. Let's see how mad we can get her before we get thrown out or arrested. Woohoo! 3 lines to find. Hers, the establishments, and my drinking. But she's not that way. That's not Excelsia. She's got that innocence. She's just playful, and so is Oliver. It's an innocent flirtation. And I never go there. Spoiler, throughout all the books, there's nothing intimate like that. It's innocent all the way. It's just, with all the characters. I just never go there. It just drags it all down. I got enough good fantasy going on. And landscapes and vistas and locations and themes and universal ones, symbolic ones, neutral ones, applicable ones, Fantasia ones, for you all to have some funs. Lots and lots of funs. Trick or treat for your yin and yang year-round candy for consciousness. Not just food for thought, but second breakfast and elevensies and luncheons for thought too. Supper, afternoon tea, and sevensies. Welcome to Fantasia, where everything's not in 6s but 7s. Proper chakra tree, not a Star of David or the Masonic Lodge or any of those things. Nope. I got 3 trilogies, yes, but only 2 of them are exoteric and clear, like base 2 of 3. The 3rd trilogy, like I said, is all book 7, because beyond it, you have to think for yourself. Although there will be about 3 books worth of length in book 7, and I've planned it that way. I want to do it that way. It's the grand finale. Gonna do it big. DeMille with his cast of thousands of pages. I'm gonna make Stephen King and Robert Jordan say, this is too much. Wimps. Bet I could drink them both under the table in a handicap match. That's Oliver coming through. That's Excelsia being inspired. Oliver is Mickey, Excelsia is Rocky. Or something like that. Or maybe Oliver is Adrian. I'll leave. I think Agglethorn is more Mickey, the Grouch. Old Grouch who's been through it all. That was my darker side. Agglethorn is my Zoe Feist side. All that he's been through. Just doesn't care about much anymore. It took the White Lady to wake him up, make him feel something. Everything else he's had to shut out. All the PTS, all the centuries of dark memories and failures and losses. The futility of going on. I think when Agglethorn met the Warriors 3, he was like, or when they formed, they were like the last. That's another story I'll never tell in full detail. I want it to be applicable to people's lives, but if I had to give any details to it, it would just be like, how did they form? And that was just like, they were the last survivors of a battle, some massacre. And in this field of carnage, they were like the last 3 standing, and Agglethorn finally found a couple people he could respect. Battle Bjarki's honor and Kareth's, their honor, just not their strength, but exoterically, but their inner strength, what they stood for, and that intrigued him enough to go on until Diana saw him and She was just looking for someone to do a job based on things, but she's like, whoa. I imagine Diana used the Warriors 3 many times before the events of Book 1. They were like her lone gunmen. She was like Fox Mulder. She needed something to go to them. Something like that. Her musketeers, I don't know. Her secret agent men. Her men in black. Her G.I. Joe team. When she needed a job done, she went to them. But I don't know. And I don't really want to know. All the other characters, all my personalities. But they're not really that many here. It's my good side, my young side, and my brother. And then my brothers. That's the alchemy going on here. And the rest, well, I won't spoil it. I'll leave you to the adventure. A very innocent Star Wars A New Hope. Very Legend of Zelda. Very Dragon's Lair. Very just classic fantasy adventure. If that's your thing, to borrow from one of the classics of my time, read on, adventurer. Your quest